How to practice self-love. What we're all actually seeking, but unfortunately has been dumbed down into some hippy-dippy, sensationalized bullshit. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I believe self-love actually is, why it's one of the most important, if not the most important thing to cultivate, and then finish up with some advanced, practical things that I actually use in my life to better cultivate self-love. I'm going to get a bit deeper with what I've sort of experienced with my spiritual practice that has allowed me to cultivate immense self-love that more consistently at a much deeper level, which I hope to share with you and inspire you to benefit you in your life. But before we do that, I want to first set the scene on what self-love actually is, because if we really want to get to the root of the matter, we have to understand what it is and why we're doing it in the first place. First things first, we really need to break the stigma that self-love is all about just like pure love and bliss and happiness. New age sensationalism, like movies and our culture, has painted the picture that self-love is sort of like this almost like airy-fairy, lovey-dovey sort of feeling. Like you think of like The Notebook, the movie The Notebook, right? But that couldn't be further from the truth. And the problem is that it's become so infectious that our whole society sort of repels and recoils at the fact of love sometimes. It's hard to even conceive of the fact that, you know, like a guy or a woman, if you're watching this, can really love themselves. It almost seems quite cringy, right? Because that's the way it's pointed out. Like it's like a 13-year-old girl in a movie who's got a crush on a boy. Or maybe we have images of like a hippie smoking a joint or something, right? And that's what self-love is. It's we're gonna save all the world, man. We're gonna be mellow, we're gonna relax and just chill and love everything. Right? But that is also another extreme to what self-love is. You know, sometimes self-love is brutal. Sometimes it's a very unpleasant sensation in the body, but it's guiding you to step away from doing an unhealthy habit of maybe smoking a cigarette or breaking up with someone in a relationship because they've been abusive to you. That's also a form of self-love. Or calling out people when they've overstepped your boundaries that you've set for yourself. It's more analogous to something like truth. And when we hear the word truth, we might think and we might get the impression of it being some sort of flat, grey, NPC-like, autonomic, robotic sort of feeling to the word truth. But it's more so radical acceptance of what is. So that means acknowledging and accepting one's power, one's capacity to take action in the world and to stand up for what's right and your values. But it's also acknowledging all the fucked upness about you as well, all of the shadow aspects of you that are often neglected, from the sensationalism through movies and that sort of stuff. Acknowledging the really dark aspects that you would never tell anyone, and embracing that fully and completely in an act of integration. To use a metaphor, sort of like a parent, like a loving parent who is overlooking all of the aspects of your own psychology and giving love and sharing love to it. That, yeah, okay, I have this messed up part of me and I have this awesome part of me, and that's all part of me. So here's a couple reasons why true self-love can make you unstoppable in this world. One of the things you realize is that unless you love yourself, you really cannot love other people. We often get into relationships and that sort of thing because these people, they fill a void in us, a feeling of lack, a feeling that we can't fulfill for ourselves because we don't fully love ourselves. But if we do love ourselves, if we really do love ourselves, we don't need to go out and find another person to fill in that void. We're fine just the way we are. And when we do find someone from a place of self-love in a relationship, we don't project our needs and neediness onto them. Another benefit of deep self-love is we have more compassion in the world. We're ready to take more compassionate action. Because if we love ourselves, like if you think to a moment when you've felt self-love, when you really feel a pleasant sensation in the body, or just a sense of acceptance despite the state of your mind, you don't feel inclined to want to cause harm in the world. You become more aligned with truth, with what matters, which is service to other people in the world. Do you think the people who run cigarette companies, they feel a lot of self-love? This toxic, lethal product that is killing people in the world? Do you think they have self-love? Probably not. Or another benefit is you become more aligned with truth, with conscious purpose in the world. You're not going out in the world to try and do things to make your dad happy, or something like that, because you know what you want. You understand at a deeper level what your needs are, and you have enough self-love to actualize those needs. Or you attract and you magnetize more people into your world that also love themselves, because your vibe at the end of the day attracts your tribe. If you love yourself, you're probably going to bring more people into your life that love themselves as well, and that spirals you upward more and more and more. You don't have people who are unconsciously driven for materialistic gain or stuff. You have people who are more integrated and appreciate the importance of service in the world and that sort of thing showing up into your life, because your vibe attracts your tribe. And more than this as well, it also gives you a deeper understanding for other people's situation. So when you have experienced suffering in your life, and you've been able to cultivate self-compassion toward it, when you see others that are also suffering in their life, and they haven't been able to bring compassion to it, and are projecting out their anger or their sadness or their anxiety out onto others in the world, it's because they have lack of self-love that you've cultivated in yourself, so you can have more compassion for these people. You understand why they're doing it because you've experienced why they're doing it. So you can have more compassion. Self-love is the root of all of that. So with all of that in mind, maybe you're beginning to see as to why a lack of self-love is the reason for the biggest catastrophes of the modern world, like the Holocaust. Do you think Hitler had a sense of self-love? I highly doubt he had a sense of self-love. If he truly had self-love, would he feel so segregated from other people that he had to create this dualism that certain people are more superior than others? I highly doubt it. So with that out of the way, now that we understand what I believe self-love is and why it's so important in this world for ourselves, like the most important thing, I'm going to talk about my experience with self-love and some practical, incredible insights that have been really bringing to my experience to cultivate more of this self-love moment to moment. And the way that I want to look at this is through the lens of awakening. So in that regard, there are two essential ways that we can look at pursuing self-love: the relative and the ultimate perspective. So the relative perspective is more concerned with conventional ways of cultivating self-love. These are quote unquote, like, I guess, more shallow ways of approaching self-love, of little like tools and tricks that you can use to feel more integrated, that actually work. But I want to keep in mind and emphasize this, that these are usually used as a springboard to pull myself out of a difficulty so that I can see clearly and bring more penetrating insight that cuts to the root level of the lack of self-love. A common analogy is this: if awakening is a mirror, which is always there, which is always inherently within us, we all have an inherent Buddha nature within us. But if dust is kicked up, so much so that we can't see the mirror of our own awakening, of our own enlightenment, that we can't do things like Vipassana meditation to see the truths of our experience, like impermanence and that sort of thing, if we can't see through it, then we're stuck. We need to be able to settle this dust before we can actually see and begin to investigate, at least settle some of the dust, before we can investigate and see our awakened true nature that lies beneath. So these relative perspectives, these are tools that are essentially allowing for the dust to settle enough that we can springboard into awakening. So the first thing that I tend to do is, if I have so much dust that's arisen from a certain conditioning arising that makes it difficult for me to see the more ultimate perspective, is I essentially will recognize, obviously, that there is a difficulty in the first place. The first step is always recognition. So if I'm feeling anxiety, I'll recognize the fact, okay, there is anxiety in the body. And one of the things I've been working with here, once I've recognized the difficulty, is a multiple personality model. So this model basically says that within us, there are all sorts of personalities. We've got like the anxious person, the wounded young child who wants recognition. We've got the courageous warrior who wants to go out and do all these amazing things for the world. And they have an interplay where one might become more predominant than another, moment to moment in experience. So what's really helpful here is with this model is when I'm feeling anxious, I might recognize the fact that I'm feeling anxious. And then it's almost like you're giving it a mental hug. A mental hug that it's okay, I see you, I acknowledge the fact that you're there. And I acknowledge the fact that you have served me in the past. Because that's all what woundings are. They are defense mechanisms that the body has created to defend itself so it doesn't get wounded like it has in the past. That's why this pattern exists. It's a form of self-protection. And the biggest mistake that we can make is trying to push that away. We push it down, repress, deny, suppress, right? And that is what actually fuels this wounded child, this wounded version of us even further to come up again in the future, to continue to defend us. So Leo from actualize.org used a really incredible example. He used the example of a dog in the movie I Am Legend. Have you guys seen the movie I Am Legend? Such a beautiful movie. Basically, in the movie, at the end of the movie, Will Smith, the main character, who has, by the way, spoilers are coming up here. I'm going to spoil a big part of the movie. But throughout the movie, Will has a dog that accompanies him throughout this zombie apocalypse. And unfortunately, the dog gets bitten by a zombie when they're out on a bit of an expedition. And at the end of the movie, you see Will Smith with his dog. And the dog's dying. He starts to reveal its teeth, and he can see that the infection is spreading. And this beautiful dog that he's with, oh God, I'm getting goosebumps right now thinking of it, but he's holding this dog. And the dog is passing away. And what he has to do is that the camera, it pans up to reveal Will Smith's face. And the dog starts going ravenous, trying to kill him, but he strangulates this poor dog, right? And this dog that's been with him through the whole movie, his only companion. And he's crying. He's really, oh God, man, I'm gonna almost like, it's a rough scene, but it's a very powerful scene. But he strangulates his dog and ends up killing this dog, right? And that's the way this multiple personality model looks at difficulties. We essentially love our ego, these faulty aspects to ourselves so much that they literally die. So that's one of the ways I've been sort of working with more difficult things as they arise, when I really can't see and I need to settle the dust of my mind a lot more. I am showing so much self-love and I'm almost hugging it like Will Smith did to his dog, to the point where it's loving the hell out of it to the point that it dies. But through the same model, there's another strategy that I've also been using, which is sort of like a negotiation. So for example, I'll take the other day where I was in a bit of a slump and I was just watching, we've all been there, right? Where you're just watching YouTube video after YouTube video, you're feeling quite down, and you just sort of are so locked into this rut that you just feel like there's no way out of it. And I had to meditate. I really, it was about the time that I usually meditate at night. And when I was feeling this difficulty, it's almost like an act of negotiation with yourself, with this one self aspect to you that really wants to continue to just give into the slump, give into the chaos of whatever you're doing. But then there's this other higher self aspect of you, which is less dominant in that situation, which is being dominated by the wounded self. And this higher self wants to meditate, wants to realize awakening for the benefit of ourself and the benefit of all beings. But the other self is like, no. So it's a process of negotiation. It's like, okay, buddy, I see that you really want to keep watching YouTube videos here, but what if instead of an hour of meditation, we do 20 minutes first? Can you do that? No. Okay, well, what about 15 minutes? So it's almost like you're having an internal dialogue, right? Which may seem crazy, but really is a very effective way to deal with and cultivate more self-love, to align yourself to a higher purpose. We need to recognize and accept this small wounded version of ourselves that wants to continue being and continue on with self-deprecating behaviors. Now, another more relative way that I've been dealing with when difficulties arise to settle the dust is to send metta, to send loving kindness, to really feel an embodied sense of what's going on if I'm feeling an emotional difficulty in the body, to really acknowledge its existence, to really feel and tap into it, And then to almost recognize the fact that this is a defense mechanism in the past that has served me in the past, but no longer does it have to do that. It's almost like thanking the emotion, just saying, I see you, I see you're there, and I love you. We're going to be okay. Sending positive words of affirmation and really feeling that. I found that to help out a lot to revert some of the conditioning of lack of self-love that I've expressed in the past. And the third way that I'm treating things on the more relative level is through a process of transmutation. This is a beautiful technique that my meditation teacher taught me. But it's basically uncovering onion layer after onion layer after onion layer of conditionings, of emotions that are coming up, and really like investigating deeper and getting deeper and getting deeper as to why this emotion is there. So you might feel emotion of anxiety. What is it that I want through the expression of this emotion? And then something will pop up into your mind. Okay, next layer. What is the next layer? What is the next thing that I want through the expression of this emotion? Next layer. And you get really, really deep and penetratively discover that freedom is inherently existent within. So I can make a video on that if you'd like. Just let me know in the comments and I'll be more than happy to as a follow-up to this one. So I've just mentioned 3 strategies, and the way that I sort of choose between these is it really depends on the situation, right? Like, you essentially develop a toolkit of self-love strategies that you can use, and when the moment is right, when the moment is most applicable, you might pull out a certain tool. So transmutation might not be used in a moment where it's of higher urgency. So let's say I am in the middle of a conversation and something gets triggered and I feel a negative emotion. I'm not going to do a transmutation there. See, that's just not feasible to do transmutation in that situation, which might take a little bit more inquiry. So that's how that works. But now I want to shift gears a little bit here, and I want to talk about some more advanced insights that I use to cultivate self-love that you might benefit from. So one of the most powerful things that I've come to appreciate is appreciating causality. So essentially, to explain causality, this immense, incredible teaching, it's like, imagine that since you were born, since you're a little baby, little things have been affecting you. Little things that are outside of your control. And these external influences, with the keyword being external there, have affected the way that you are, your personality. You know, doctors cut your umbilical cord and maybe that had a little small effect on your personality. Or wind blew on your skin, which made you go inside on a particular day, and that affected your personality. Now you don't like cold. That sort of thing. And these things build up layer after layer after layer, moment by moment. But notice that we're not in control. That is the key thing, because everything is dependent on external influences. So this is so profound, and the profundity, again, cannot really be appreciated until you've inquired into your own mind. But this is so profound because if I say something, let's say I'm out at a social gathering or something, and I say something stupid, when you realize that that is the best thing that you could have said in that moment, there is literally nothing else that could have been said in that moment, then how liberating is that? That is the deepest level of self-love, to realize that you are not in control of what's going on. I mean, we can act like we're in control, like we're these meat vehicles and I'm Sam and I'm deciding what I'm going to say next. But the reality is what's happening is thoughts are coming into my mind and I'm not in control of those thoughts. They're just appearing like this. I'm not in control of that, you know? So if you play around with this right now, you can try and think of your next thought. What is your next thought going to be? If you pay attention right now to your mind, you'll see that, oh, I didn't actually generate that next thought. That was just a random thing that occurred into my mind. But the key thing here is when we do stupid things, when we do silly things, when we do things that we regret, that we reflect on and we think back on in the past, that we did some really horrible things, or we can have so much self-love for ourselves when we realize that that is the best thing we could have done in that moment. How liberating. How freaking liberating. So I want to finish up here with the balance of these perspectives. So on one hand, we have the perspective of the relative truth, which is that I have to work with and deal with the content to be able to settle down the dust so I can see my inherent awakening, so I can do deeper vipassana, so I can practice deeper non-dual practice, because there's just so much crap in the way that I can't even begin to see that. But on the other hand, there's a more ultimate perspective of causality, of not being in control, of the interconnectedness, of embracing all experience no matter what arises and having complete equanimity with it, of having complete non-reactivity to it. And walking and balancing these two can be quite difficult sometimes. But my meditation teacher gave me really good advice here. She said we should come to experience fresh each time that we feel a difficulty, and just honestly ask ourselves in that moment, how should I approach this difficulty? Should I look at it through the lens of transmutation, or should I just try and push through and bring some investigative quality into it to lead me to a deeper awakening, to realize its emptiness, to realize its impermanence, to realize the fact that it's not really, it's like a painted tiger. It's an illusory feeling of danger that doesn't actually hold up, and the human condition interprets it as painful when the universe couldn't give a shit what it feels like. So walking this line is quite tricky, but ultimately that is something that we have to come to each experience with a fresh pair of eyes. And my personal opinion is eventually we have to really transcend dealing with content, but there's always the opportunity that if something does become so extreme that we can't see our inherent awakening, that we might do some of these more relative practices to transmute to get to a much deeper state of awakening. But otherwise, if you like the video and consider subscribing to the channel for more videos on practical and relatable science, spirituality, and psychology to help wake you up in your life. But other than that, much love, guys. If you made it to the end, this is a much longer video than usual, just trying out new stuff here. But I love you so much, and I'll be looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Adios.